Hello and welcome back to the Ever-Changing World podcast. I'm your host, Ava Zanetti. Today's episode is going to take a look at economics. It's going to be a big focus on that. And today I really want to talk about the UK economic downturn, which I'm sure many of you have heard about, as well as the recent talk, which has been a talk for a little bit, the recent talks of recessions. What exactly is a recession? What that would mean for the economy, what that means for an economy in the past, and how that looks, and what that means for a country, and what that means for the people within a country. And I want to take just an economic focus on that. A little note on last week's episode, which, is a little bit funny because there was no episode. I want to apologize for the very late notice that there's going to be no episode. I was very, very busy last week, though I am every week, but last week I don't remember exactly what it was, but I just remember not being in the right state of mind to be doing a podcast, and I just knew, the episode was going to be bad, and I didn't have enough time, and I was really stressed, so I just canceled last week's, which I'm going to try not to do again. I really want to keep on top of it, and I think I might fix my recording schedule so I'm more on top of it, because even as I'm recording this now, I have, a physics test and a French test and all these other things I need to do tomorrow. It's alright, because I'm, of course, making the time, and realistically, it is just half an hour out of my day, which, I could spend scrolling on TikTok, and it would be worse doing that instead of this. So, on that note, today's episode is really just going to be a big focus on the current issue in the UK, and then how we're going to take that and kind of think about how it's going to affect other countries, and what it shows the countries are going to keep going into, and all of these other things. So to begin, let's talk about the UK, because I feel like the UK is where we need to begin, as there is a huge economic crisis, of course. So let's start. The UK's new financial chief warns of difficult decisions ahead amid political and market turmoil. So PM Liz Truss, who is the new prime minister, as we all know, the Donald Trump lookalike, has left the office. Liz Truss, the Hillary Clinton lookalike, is now in office. Quite funny. She has already fired the financial minister within 38 days. So let's talk about it, because it's been really crazy for her. She entered office, and, she gets handed, oh, look, you meet the queen. Oh, look, 3 days later, the queen is dead. And then, oh, look, your financial officer is making horrible decisions. And, oh, look, you gotta fire him because your economy is now in turmoil. So she's on a really rough patch. And, I guess she's handling it to some degree. I don't know if it's quite well, but she's handling it to a degree. And I'm not sure how I would handle a situation like this. So that's how we're going to state it. So, the new finance minister of UK warned of difficult decisions ahead on Saturday, which was a few days ago. I apologize for that notification. A few days ago. The morning after he had replaced his predecessor, who was only 38 days into the job. Jeremy Hunt told a range of British news broadcasters that tax cuts promised by embattled Prime Minister Liz Truss would not be as big as first thought, and government departments would have to cut their budgets. Warning of difficult decisions ahead, Hunt told British broadcaster Sky News. Some taxes will not be cut as quickly as people would want. Some taxes will go up. He added that all government departments are going to have find more efficiencies than they were planning to, hinting at a return of all-trustee economics, a fiscal policy favored by successful leaders of his ruling Conservative Party in the aftermath of the 2008 financial crisis and the big real estate crash, of course. So what this is, and I want to make sure I get this correct, what we are looking at auditory economics. Let me make sure I get this correct, of course. So, austeri is a set of political economic policies that aim to reduce government budget deficits through spending cuts, tax increases, or a combination of both. So, basically, controlling the government spending habits and controlling their pocket, which I think should be done regularly, anyways. But, I guess sometimes it's more needed in certain times than not. Hunt also reiterated a statement from Britain's Treasury Friday that said he would settle government's medium-term fiscal plan on October 31st. He relayed a similar message to several other British broadcasters as attempting to distance himself from his predecessor. This is a difficult name. Kwasi Kwarteng. I don't know. Who was annexed Friday after weeks of market panic stoked by the economic path or plan he had laid out last month. Carsey became the second shortest serving Councillor of the Chancellor, as the British Finance Minister is known. Chancellor. There you go. I don't know. Amid speculation that she would also be ousted just weeks after taking office, Truss told the news conference Friday that she had changed course to reassure markets of our fiscal discipline. So many people are like, oh, I think Liz Truss is going to leave office now, which would be quite the insane return that she got in and then she would leave, and it would just be quite the mess. Amid speculation that she could also be ousted just weeks after taking office, she told again to reassure markets of her fiscal discipline. So I want to go over that. She's really just trying to save herself. She's trying to save her butt here. And basically be like, I didn't really agree. And look, I fired this guy. And look, it's all going to work out. She was also seeking to reassure Conservative Party members who polling numbers have plummeted alongside the value of the pound. As we know, the pound has gone down immensely, which is very scary. The financial crisis the UK currently finds itself in was unfortunately unavoidable. George Dibb, head of Centre of Economic Justice for the Institute of Public Policy Research, a London think tank, told NBC News Saturday. Earlier this month, after repeatedly rejecting any suggestion of changing course, Truss scraped a proposal to cut taxes for those earning more than £150,000 a year, or in US dollars, $167,000. This failed to claim markets or lawmakers. The plan called for cutting £45 billion in taxes, or $50.4 billion, more than the United Kingdom's annual defense budget. Which is crazy, cutting taxes that much. I mean, obviously the government needs it to a degree. But without identifying either how this would be funded or what services would need to be cut as a result. Again, it just sounds like she was trying to be like a principal of a school, of a high school, and be like, I gotta cut the art department and this department, because we need more money for the sports department. It's just like the military. We need more money for the military, right? That's kind of what it sounds like here. She's just trying to be the principal and cut everybody off. The proposal saw interest rates and mortgage rates rise, the value of the pound crash, and the government's cost of borrowing soar. More details on this were revealed in a speech October 31st, but the political and economic damage had already been done. The Central Bank of England was forced to step in and buy billions of pounds of government bonds known as gilts to claim the market. As it did so, the bank warned of material risk to the UK's entire financial system. On Tuesday, the bank is in an interview to stop a fire sale. Crucially, the bank's bond buying program was set to end Friday, meaning the government had to convince markets its economic plan was sound enough to avoid further chaos. The International Monetary Fund strongly criticized the unfunded tax cuts, while economists and commentators across the world questioned the wisdom of such a radical plan. While the stacking of crunching and the U-turn on some of the unfunded tax cuts might offer a little breathing space, it appears that the damage had already been done, not just to the economy, but also to the government, Dibb said. Although Dibb agreed with Hunt's assessment that tax rises were likely necessary, he said, after a decade of austerity, there are no more public sector cuts available to make. Rumors are already swirling that senior Conservative Party members are plotting how to remove the Prime Minister from power, and, for Adam Menon, a professor of European politics at King's College London, the question is whether Liz Truss can survive into the next week. That is a crazy statement that I'm going to reiterate because it's just crazy. The question is whether Liz Truss can survive into the next week. We're not even sure if this woman is going to last more than 2 months, which is insane. Britain's last two prime ministers, Theresa May and Boris Johnson, of course Trump look-alike, both resigned after internal strife in the Conservative Party made their positions untenable. Truss is Britain's third prime minister in 6 years. Clearly, Britain is having a leadership problem, and they need to fix that. They need to figure out how they can keep a prime minister in office for, longer than, 3 years. I don't know how long Boris or Theresa May were in office, but, longer than however they lasted. Bennett added that government's opinions were increasingly limited and that a poor market reaction to Jeremy Hunt's media appearances would leave the British government with no choice but to make farther U-turns. So clearly the government is having major issues. And the pound just went down. So, of course, this is conservative drama. And to get out a little bit more, I just want to see if there's any more information I can gain from this. So, the bank doesn't want to put out a crisis, but sees this rule purely as providing liquidity in every distressed markets. One of Mr. Bailey's predecessors, Mervyn King, pursued a similar line of credit in the crunch of 2007, warning that those investors who gone wild in the good times must pay the losses, that any help would constitute a moral hazard. The argument is perfectly sound until a crisis strikes. So the bank is taking a similar gamble. It would be wiser to relent, as its former government had to, and show more support. Against the noisy backdrop, the bank has also been a bad communicator. This week alone, Mr. Bailey said the intervention will end on Friday, hours before it was reported bank staff has already been saying the opposite. So the bank even has been quite, confused and just a mess. And trying to figure out how to save a whole country's government. When they said ridiculous things about tax cuts that really, never should have been announced, because that was just a ridiculous tax cut to even propose. So, to finish this topic off before we go into recessions, so she fired the financial minister. She is trying to save herself from getting fired from her job. And pretty much the UK's pound dropped heavily. And that's kind of what we have been dealing with and we've been seeing with the UK. Obviously, we do have a little bit of a leadership problem over there, as they can't really keep a proper, finance minister, a counselor, or anything without, it going haywire. So, that's what we've been seeing with all these people, and Liz is an interesting character, and we're going to see how she develops. And I think that'll be very interesting to see the development of that, to see if she stays in office, and how that is going to affect Britain's economy and the world. And obviously, recessions are a little bit different from silly finance ministers and silly prime ministers. But I think it's really important to talk about, as it's been such a big topic lately, and I'm surprised I haven't talked about it. I might have, but I want to bring it up again, because I think it's a very important topic just to speak about and speak to and get out there. Because it's happening, and it's something that we need to watch and we need to think about, and is really valuable. So, to first start, I want to speak about, is a recession really coming? Because obviously we had some form of a recession when COVID hit, which was a situational recession. But we are obviously in still an economic downturn. And of course we are speaking to the US, though obviously this relates to the whole world, as inflation rates are going insane. So I'm going to speak for the US. Anyone hoping the US economy finally returned to normal 2022 following more than 2 years of dislocation from the COVID-19 pandemic has been sorely disappointed. Of course, the main culprit of this is the war in Ukraine, which elevated inflation and higher interest rates are raising concerns of the U.S. economy on the brink of a recession. Several reliable economic indicators are flashing warnings that the U.S. economy could be rolling over. Fortunately, the U.S. labor market remains strong, and experts are divided on whether or not a recession is inevitable in this unique economic environment. This is why Fed Chair Jerome Powell said this summer that he didn't believe the U.S. was in a recession. Just because the risk of recession is rising, economists caution there's no reason for the average American to panic. Recessions have been a relatively common occurrence over the past century and have produced attractive opportunities for long-term investors. Of course, you want to buy low, sell high. What is a recession exactly, though? So there is no universal definition for an economic recession, but analysts and investors commonly define it as 2 consecutive quarters of negative gross domestic product, or GDP. So basically, the economics of a country is going down. But that metric, we are already in one. The U.S. GDP contracted at a seasonally adjusted annual rate of 0.9% in the second quarter of 2022, to dropping by 1.6% in the first quarter. This is why you hear many pundits, especially in election year, argue that a recession has commenced. But the National Bureau of Economic Research is officially tasked with identifying U.S. recessions, and its definition of recession is somewhat vague. They say that a recession is a significant decline in economic activity that is spread across the economy and lasts more than a few months, so it's not something that just jumps up and down. For instance, the COVID recession lasted just 2 months, well below the 2-quarter mark. Jeffrey Roach, chief economist for LPL Financial, says a key word in the recession system definition so far in 2022 may be significant. A slowdown has to be significant, broad and sustained before it qualifies as a recession. Currently, the economy is downshifting to a much slower growing path, but the decline in economic activity is not significant in our view. Roach points out that U.S. companies are still hiring and consumers are still spending. The U.S. economy has added 315,000 jobs in August, and the unemployment rate is essentially where it was before the pandemic, which, if you don't know, unemployment rate being at a few percent is actually a good thing. 5 to 7% is around the number. It should be for the U.S. as well. And that's actually a good thing because it allows for a healthy amount of people to be working and not, and it's just a healthy number. So we do want a bit of unemployment, but obviously not too much. It has to be a balance. And that's the same thing with inflation as well. You do want some inflation, but not too much inflation. So if the NBER ever decides to confirm conventional wisdom that the economy is in a recession, and when they decide to do so is anyone's guess. Everyday Americans, of course, care little for such technicalities when prices are rising so quickly and financial markets are struggling. So why are Americans worried about a recession in the first place? After years of lockdowns and restrictions, many observers hoped pent-up demand would generate a post-pandemic economic boom. Instead, Americans are worrying about inflation and recession. So, inflation and supply chain disruptions. Supply chain disruptions in Asia and economic sanctions against Russia, oil, and gas have exacerbated the U.S. inflation problem that began in 2021. The Federal Reserve also underestimated how aggressively it would need to act to bring inflation under control. The BEA recently reported the Personal Consumption Expenditures, or PCE, price index rose 6.3% year over year in July. Core PCE, the Fed's measure of U.S. inflation, was up 4.6% from a year ago. While core PCE growth is down slightly from peak levels of 5.3% in February, it remains near multi-decade highs seen last in the 1980s. Consumers are feeling the brunt of increased costs for everyday goods and services. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported on September 13th that Consumer Price Index, or CPI, is a measure of the cost of living, soared by 8.3% from last year, even as gas prices started to decline. So, Fed interest rates have hiked as well. In response to alarming inflation, the Fed has raised the federal funds rate substantially this year, including 75 BPS rate hikes at meetings in June, July, and September. With inflation remaining stubbornly high, the Fed has to implement yet another hawkish pivot by raising rates another 75 basis points and signaling to markets that additional increases in rates are appropriate to bring down inflation, said Charlie Ripley, senior investment strategist at Allianz Investment Management. At the time of his writing, the bond market is currently pricing in a 65% chance of a 50 BPS rate hike and a 34% chance of a 75 BPS hike in November, according to a FedWatch tool. There's a 1% chance shot at a full percentage point increase. The higher interest rates rise, the more expensive it becomes for U.S. companies to borrow money to invest in innovation and growth. Rising credit card, mortgage, auto loan, and other interest rates can also reduce the disposable income Americans have to spend in the economy, weighing down on corporate earnings and stock prices. Of course, that's the point. The Fed wants to quash inflation by slowing down the economy. They have to be able to do so without causing too much damage. So the case against recession. Despite market fears and warning signs, many economists say the economy is simply too healthy at the moment to consider current conditions as a recession. Peter Astle, head portfolio management for Common with Financial Network, says the latest U.S. jobs reports should reassure investors. It's difficult to rectify how some are claiming the economy is in a recession when the job growth remains well above long-term averages and wage growth isn't the strongest. Quinn Crosby, chief equity strategist for LPL Financial, says the solid U.S. labor market suggests a U.S. recession is not imminent. However, if recession fears trigger a shift in consumer behavior. Because of the market's intense focus on whether we are currently in recession or heading into one, the oft-told comment by economists that it's important to watch what consumers do that counts and not what they say is becoming increasingly important. He says U.S. consumers account for nearly 70% of the overall economy, and consumers are getting squeezed by higher gas prices, higher interest rates, and of course the crazy amount of inflation with every product that we see, as well as grocery bills. In June, the University of Michigan's surveys of consumers sentiment index fell to its lowest level dating back to the mid-1970s and has only slightly recovered. So, really, the question is, should you be concerned about a recession? So if the U.S. does slip into recession sometime this year or in 2023, there's no reason for investors to panic. First off, recessions don't historically last very long. The average duration of U.S. recessions since World War II is just about 11.1 months. And the COVID recession was only about 2 months. U.S. recessions are fairly common. Since World War II, there's been about one U.S. recession roughly every 5 years. Where recessions can lead to job losses and other financial difficulties for Americans, they have been certainly excellent in buying opportunities for long-term investors. It can be extremely difficult for investors to time a market boom perfectly, and stocks tend to bottom several months before a recession when peak pessimism is reached. But some stocks have a track record for doing relatively well during recessions. For example, Target, Walmart, and Home Depot are able to do this. This really is because people still need to buy food. Think about it this way, right? Target, there's food. Walmart, there's food. Home Depot, there's necessary goods. Even if there's a recession and people don't want to spend money, they have to. So this is why that happens with those certain companies. So looking all in all, I mean, you shouldn't be too concerned about a recession. And even if you are, the only thing you should be concerned about for a recession is you should only be concerned about whether or not, you can, have a job. And as long as you have a job and it's stable, you shouldn't be too worried. As well as if you have extra cash lying around, you should be investing it soon. That would be a really great idea, as you could get really good returns on your investments or ROIs, just depending on, when it occurs, and hopefully you time everything right, and you can make a good chunk of change. So honestly, recessions can be good in a lot of ways. Of course, you have extra cash lying around. If you don't, it sucks because you can't spend as much money, but you can just keep saving all your money, or whatever little money you have, spend on the necessary goods, and you should be okay, again, as they don't last very long. So, with that, speaking about recessions, and to end this off, I want to give tips about how to deal with being in a recession. Even though we might not be heading into recession, we might as well speak to whether you may end up in a recession, even one day, even 5 years down the line, you may end up in a recession. So it's good to speak about what, how to prepare. So first, to speak a little bit about this, runaway inflation is a recession. Sometimes some people are agreeing it might happen in 2023. Some people are agreeing it may never happen. We'll see. But this is because of inflation rates. So these have grown and risen to levels not seen in 4 decades. High inflation rates negatively impact purchasing power and make it more difficult for people to buy everyday items like necessities and groceries. Inflation also has a negative impact on economic efficiency, unless it's in the healthy amount. And inflation in a healthy amount is 2 to 3%. So you want to have 2 to 3% inflation, because that means your economy is growing in a healthy manner, but you really don't want it any higher than that. So let's get back to how to prepare for a recession. Number 1, reduce spending, particularly spending on non-essential items immediately. Take the opportunity to review your budget and reconsider daily spending habits that add up. Rather than buying lunch each day, consider packing a lunch. Reconsider those subscriptions that automatically come out of your account each month. It's a great time to rationalize and justify your spending habits and reconsider budgets. It's also a great time to look at your spending habits in terms of clothes or unnecessary things and really think about whether you need something or not. It's going to build really good habits, to be quite honest, if you use this recession as a time, if it does, prop up as a time to, really understand what's happening, really understand, all the downturns and the upturns, etc. And yeah, I think it's just a great time to stop spending. And I think you should stop spending in a lot of ways anyways, but if you really need an excuse for it or a reason to stop spending at high amounts, this is the time. Second, pay off your credit card debt now. It's important to pay down high interest debt as much as possible, as soon as possible. Over the coming months, interest rates will continue to rise, making it harder to manage debts. Lower balances allow to a lower level of interest payments during any period or lost income or employment, thus making it easier to navigate financially difficult periods. You don't want debt sitting around, and you don't want interest to keep hiking up, and then your debt is worth even more than it should have been. So you might as well just pay it off now. 3. Pay close attention to bill payments and avoid paying late charges. These charges add up over time. Make a plan to make sure you can pay everything on time, and make sure you're making a smart economic plan so you can make sure you are on top of all your finances. Again, you should be doing this on a regular basis, even without the pending doom of a recession. Though, again, if you need an excuse to do it, the excuse is now. 4. Be prepared to lose your job. I know this sounds scary, but ensure your resumes and cover letters are up to date and you're prepared to job hunt. In the event of a job loss, be ready to find another job at a moment's notice. As well, it's important to have a cash reserve. Make sure you have enough money to last you for a few months on your regular lifestyle spending habits. As if you do end up losing a job, you are going to need to deal with that. And you're going to need to, deal with that to a high degree. Number 5, become more hireable. This is kind of along the same bottom line, so I'm going to kind of skip that. And number 6, if possible, try to move to a recession-proof job. So this, obviously is making sure, a job that would be in, like, government sector, healthcare, within education, since those jobs usually are lost, as we've seen with COVID. I mean, the jobs that were lost were all ones that were very volatile, and, it was very easy to quickly lose that job. So yeah, overall, I think those are great tips. As well, again, I'd like to add that cash reserve thing. Make sure you have enough money to live on. And this is, again, without a recession too. But make sure you have enough money to live on with your spending habits, or you will be kind of screwed. So yeah, that is today's episode. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope you learned something about the UK. Keep up with that news, as I'm very curious to see how long Liz Truss will last in office. As well, make sure you're keeping on the news of recessions, and make sure you are safe. Make sure you know what you're doing, you understand it, and make sure that you are prepared in case anything happens. So please connect with the podcast. The Instagram is at ever.changingworld. Again, at ever.changingworld. I post all the time on here. The Twitter is everchangingwor. Again, everchangingwor. The website is shows.acast.com/ever-changing-world. Again, shows.acast.com/ever-changing-world. Thank you so much for listening. Tune in next week, next Tuesday, for another amazing episode. Follow to stay updated. And the world is always changing.